If I could erase one night from my life, it would be that one. But memories don't come with erasers. They linger like smoke in a closed room, thin, choking, and impossible to ignore. It began, as many disasters do, quietly, in the spaces between words, in the hollow silences that grow when two people share a home, but not a life. My name is Diane. I'm 41. I'm a mother, a wife, and a woman who made the kind of mistake you don't come back from. But before you judge me, before you even try to understand what I did, you need to know who I was, who we were before everything fell apart. Our house stood at the edge of a cul-de-sac, picture perfect from the outside. White siding, flower beds I maintained more out of habit than joy, and a porch swing that hadn't moved in years. Inside, it was quieter than any home should be. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, it was empty. Tom, my husband of 13 years, had grown distant long before Jacob came home for the summer. Tom wasn't cruel. He wasn't abusive. He was absent. Even when he was there, he wasn't. He spent most of his time buried in work calls, locked in his home office, or watching TV with the volume high and his emotions low. I don't remember the last time he kissed me like he meant it. Maybe a year. Maybe more. He'd grown used to my presence the way one gets used to background noise, tolerated but unnoticed. I told myself I was fine. I had my routines, my garden, my evening walks. And now, Jacob was back. My son from my first marriage, Jacob had always been gentle, thoughtful, the kind of boy teachers adored and other boys ignored. He was 22 now, home from college for the summer. Taller, with broader shoulders and a new edge of quiet confidence. But he was still Jacob, my sweet boy, shy around girls, more comfortable with books than beer pong. The first evening he was back, we sat at the kitchen table eating reheated lasagna. Tom was, of course, in his office. "You've changed," I said, studying Jacob as he picked at his food. He smiled, eyes warm. "Hope it's for the better. You seem older. Grown up. Is that your way of saying I look tired?" I laughed. It was easy with him. Easier than it should have been. Later that night, I heard him in the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge. I padded in barefoot, half asleep. "Can't sleep?" I asked. He shrugged, holding a glass of milk. Still adjusting. There was something about how he leaned against the counter, relaxed, yet uncertain. A boy trying on the skin of a man. "You ever feel like no one teaches you the important stuff?" he asked suddenly. I tilted my head. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then said, "Like relationships. Intimacy. I feel like I'm supposed to know how to handle it all, but I don't. And it's embarrassing." It took me a second to realize what he was really saying. I gave him a gentle smile. "You're not supposed to know everything. You're figuring it out." He looked down into his glass. "Lena's my first real girlfriend. She wants to take things to the next level, and I don't want to mess it up." There it was. Vulnerability, raw and rare. I wanted to give him advice, something useful. But the words caught in my throat. This was my son. And this wasn't a conversation I'd ever imagined having with him. "Maybe just focus on how she feels," I said finally. "Make sure she feels safe, seen. That's what matters more than anything else." He nodded, slowly. "Thanks, Mom." Then he hugged me. It lasted a little longer than usual. And when he pulled away, I saw something flicker in his eyes, quickly buried, but not imagined. I blamed it on the late hour, on exhaustion, on wine. But I felt it. A crack, small and almost imperceptible, had formed. 2 weeks passed. Tom's schedule stayed the same. Early out, late back, no effort. Jacob and I slipped into a rhythm, movies at night, walks in the morning, shared meals where he asked about my favorite books, my childhood, my regrets. He started telling me things he hadn't before. How he felt like he was always behind everyone else. How intimacy scared him. How he didn't think he was good enough for girls like Lena. "She's perfect," he told me one night on the back porch, staring into the darkness. "And I don't want to be the guy she regrets." I reached over, touched his hand. "You're more than enough, Jacob. You always have been." He didn't let go of my hand. I should have pulled away. But I didn't. Maybe I missed being wanted. Maybe I missed being seen. Maybe I was just too tired to care about the rules anymore. One night, after Tom stumbled in reeking of gin and indifference, I found myself crying in the laundry room. I sat on the cold tile floor, back against the dryer, pressing my palm to my chest to keep my heart from splintering. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from Jacob. "Thanks for always being there, Mom. I mean it." 10 simple words. But they filled a space that had been hollow for too long. The next evening, Jacob came home early. I was in the kitchen, still in my robe, hair up, no makeup. He walked in, holding a small bag. "I got you something," he said, almost shy. Inside was a candle. Vanilla and cedarwood. "Smells like you," he said. I didn't know what to say. I stared at the candle, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness, by the way he noticed me. No one had bought me a gift in over a year. "Jacob, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," he interrupted. "You matter. I hope you know that." There it was again. That look. Something intense. Something unspoken. And for a heartbeat too long, I didn't look away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed beside Tom's unmoving body, staring at the ceiling. 1,000 thoughts whirled through my mind. I remembered Jacob's words. His eyes. The way he looked at me, not like a son, not quite, but like a man trying to understand the woman in front of him. What scared me most was not that he looked. It was that I looked back. The days blurred. Jacob and I found ourselves orbiting each other in smaller and smaller circles, the distance between us narrowing, the air thick with something unspoken. Every glance seemed longer, every brush of contact charged with an invisible current I didn't know how to turn off. Tom, oblivious or uninterested, spent his evenings glued to the television, drowning himself in work emails or whiskey. I became background noise in his life, and somehow, that absence of attention only made Jacob's presence feel louder. He was around more often, always helpful, always gentle. Fixing the garden hose without being asked. Making us dinner. Telling me I looked beautiful in the early light, even if I was only wearing an old sweatshirt. Each time, I told myself it was harmless. That I was just starved for affection. That nothing had happened. Not really. But something was happening. And it was happening fast. It was a rainy Saturday evening when everything shifted. Tom had left earlier that morning to visit an old friend out of town. I didn't ask questions. I stopped asking questions a long time ago. The house was unusually quiet. Jacob had spent most of the day in his room. I assumed he was studying or gaming. I spent the day cleaning rooms that didn't need cleaning, checking the same windows twice, pacing the floorboards like a prisoner in my own home. Around 9 p.m., I made tea and settled on the couch, a blanket wrapped around my legs, trying to lose myself in a book. But the words swam on the page. My mind was elsewhere, caught in the storm of everything we hadn't said. Then I heard his voice behind me. "Can I sit?" I looked up. Jacob stood at the edge of the room, uncertain, vulnerable. "Of course," I said, moving the blanket aside. He sat beside me, careful to leave space between us. We stared at the flickering TV screen, not really watching. The rain drummed steadily against the windows. "She broke up with me," he said after a while. I turned, startled. "Lena?" He nodded, said I was too intense, too emotional. My heart twisted. "I'm sorry, sweetheart." He gave a sad, crooked smile. "She said I needed to figure myself out before I could be with someone else. Maybe she's right." I reached for his hand, without thinking. "You're fine just the way you are, Jacob." His grip tightened slightly, like he needed the reassurance to physically hold him in place. "You've always been the one person who made me feel that way," he said quietly. Like I was enough. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The silence was heavy now. Not empty, not cold, but expectant. "Can I ask you something?" he said, eyes fixed on the floor. I nodded slowly. "Have you ever felt something for someone you weren't supposed to?" The air seemed to stop moving. I looked at him, really looked at him, his face soft in the low light, his expression raw, uncertain, pleading for truth. "Yes," I said finally, voice barely a whisper. "I have." He turned to face me fully now. "What did you do about it?" "I tried to ignore it," I said. "Tried to pretend it wasn't real." His breath caught in his throat. "Did it work?" I looked down. No. The rain outside intensified, tapping harder against the windows like fingers desperate to be let in. Jacob leaned closer. "You don't have to pretend with me, Mom." That word, Mom, it should have broken the moment. But it didn't. It only made the ache in my chest grow. He reached up slowly, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. His touch was light, trembling. "I know this is wrong," he whispered. "But it doesn't feel that way. Not with you." I should have pulled away. I should have stopped him. I should have said something, anything. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I wasn't his mother. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a responsible adult making the right decision. I was just a woman, broken and lonely, desperate to feel like she mattered to someone, anyone. He kissed me. It was hesitant at first, searching. But I didn't stop him. I let it happen. I let it all happen. The next morning was a cold silence wrapped in warm sheets. I woke up before him, my body aching with the weight of what we'd done. My mind spun in circles, each thought darker than the last. What have I done? I watched him sleep for a moment, peaceful, unaware of the wreckage waiting just beyond the sheets. He looked so young, too young, and I felt ancient. I slipped out of bed, pulled on my robe, and stood at the window, watching the sun creep above the trees. My reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, hollowed out. A woman unraveling. Jacob stirred behind me. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice rough from sleep. I nodded, still facing the window. "We shouldn't have done that." He sat up. "I know." Silence again. He stood, wrapped the blanket around his waist, and moved beside me. "But I don't regret it." I turned to him, startled. He held my gaze. "I don't. I've never felt closer to anyone in my life." The words, meant to comfort, only deepened my shame. "I'm your mother, Jacob," I said. This was a mistake." His face twisted. "You weren't just my mother last night. You were someone who needed to be seen. Just like me." I shook my head. "That doesn't make it right." He didn't argue. Just nodded and left the room. I stood alone, clutching the sides of my robe like armor, heart pounding in my ears. The line had been crossed, and there was no going back. Later that day, Tom returned home. He barely noticed my silence, the stiffness in my body, the tremor in my voice. To him, I was still background noise. But to Jacob, I had become something else entirely. And that terrified me more than anything, because the real danger wasn't just what we had done. It was the wanting, the terrible, impossible truth that part of me still wanted more. Guilt is a living thing. It breathes in the spaces between conversations. It lingers in shadows, sharp and watchful. It nests in your chest and eats away at your sleep, your smile, your sense of who you are. After that night, everything changed. And yet nothing did. Tom didn't notice. He was as distant as ever, moving through the house like a ghost that refused to leave, sitting at the kitchen table with his phone in one hand and indifference in the other. He still asked the same lifeless questions. "Did you check the mail? We need more dish soap. Is dinner ready?" Each one made my skin crawl. Not because of what he said, but because of what I had become in the silence that followed. Jacob avoided me for 3 days. He stayed in his room mostly, only coming out to grab food or leave the house. He didn't meet my eyes. Didn't speak unless spoken to. He was punishing himself. Or punishing me. Maybe both. And I let him. Because I didn't know how to fix something that should never have happened. It was a Thursday evening when we finally spoke again. Tom was working late, an actual meeting this time, and the house was thick with early summer heat and unanswered questions. I was folding laundry on the couch when Jacob walked in, quiet as ever. "I'm leaving next week," he said. I didn't look up. I folded a shirt, then another. "Early," he shrugged. "I just think it's better. For everyone." I paused, the soft fabric of one of his t-shirts still in my hands. "Is that what you really want?" I asked. He sat on the edge of the armchair, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. "No," he admitted, "but I think it's what we need." I finally looked at him. His jaw was tight, eyes rimmed red, like sleep had become an enemy. "I don't regret caring about you," he said, "but I regret what it did to you." I swallowed hard. "You didn't do anything to me, Jacob. I made my own choices." He shook his head. "I just wanted to feel close to someone. And you were the only one who ever made me feel like I mattered." There was a beat of silence. Then, he looked at me, truly looked, and added, "But love shouldn't cost this much." The words sliced through me like ice water. He stood, walked to the kitchen, and poured himself a glass of water with shaking hands. "Does he know?" he asked. I blinked. "Tom?" He nodded. "No," I said, voice brittle. "And he never will." Jacob didn't respond. He stared out the window, as if something outside might offer him clarity we didn't have here. "You deserve more than what you've had," he finally said. "But not from me. Not like that." Then he turned, walked upstairs, and didn't come back down until the next morning. Tom noticed the change in Jacob before he noticed anything in me. "Is the kid all right?" he asked one morning, slurping coffee without looking up from his tablet. "He's just tired," I replied quickly. Tom grunted. "Kids today. Always tired. No idea what real stress is." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled. Later that day, I found Jacob's packed duffel bag by the door. A simple message scrawled on a notepad. "I need space. I'll call when I'm ready." No signature. No goodbye. I sat on the bottom stair and stared at that note for a long time. Part of me was relieved. The other part felt like someone had carved a hollow into my chest and left it empty. I didn't cry. Not that day. But that night, after Tom had fallen asleep on the couch, snoring into the glow of the TV, I walked into Jacob's room. Everything was untouched, except for the absence. His scent still lingered. A book still lay face down on his desk. A t-shirt, forgotten, hung from the back of his chair. I closed the door behind me and sat on his bed. And finally I wept. Not because I missed him, though I did, but because I knew that part of me had changed forever. And it wasn't something I could take back. 2 weeks passed. Tom never asked where Jacob went. He assumed it was just a fight, a young man's drama, not something deeper. He didn't notice how quiet I'd become, how often I disappeared into walks that lasted hours, how I stopped cooking dinner. He didn't notice much at all. Then one night, he came into the kitchen, half drunk, holding a beer and a folder. "We need to talk," he slurred. My heart clenched. I was sure. He knows. But what he said next surprised me. "I've been offered a job in Arizona. Might take it." I blinked. "Arizona?" He nodded. "Better pay. Smaller team. They want me to start in a month." "And what about us?" I asked quietly. He looked up, as if the thought hadn't even occurred to him. "We'll figure it out. You could come. Or stay. Whatever makes sense." Whatever makes sense. That was Tom in a sentence. Detached. Transactional. There was no apology. No connection. Just logistics. That night, lying beside him, I realized something I should have known long before Jacob came home. Tom didn't love me. He hadn't for years. And I didn't love him either. We were just two people who once had a spark and let it die quietly, without ceremony. 1 week later, I got a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A real letter. The handwriting was Jacob's. "I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness, or to give it. I'm writing because I need you to know that I still think about you. Every day. Not because of what we did, but because of what we meant to each other. You gave me something I never had before, real attention, real connection. I know it was wrong. I know we crossed a line. But I still believe the feelings were real. I'm trying to move forward. To grow up. To understand what love is without ruining it. And I hope someday you find something good. Something that doesn't hurt to hold. No return address. No signature. Just that one message. I read it 3 times before folding it neatly and tucking it in the drawer beside my bed. Tom left for Arizona a few days later. I didn't go with him. He didn't protest. Now, the house is quiet. Different than before. Not hollow. Just honest. I work part-time at the library now. I tend my garden again. I go on walks without needing an excuse. Sometimes I catch myself looking out the window when the mail arrives, hoping for another letter that doesn't come. But I don't wait the way I used to. I live with the weight of what remains, and the memory of a line crossed not in lust, but in loneliness.